She believed, so she did. There is a quiet power that awakens within a woman the moment she stops asking the world for permission to be who she is. She doesn't need applause. She doesn't need validation. What she needs, and what she finds, is belief. Belief not in the system, not in the noise of the crowd, but in the still voice that whispers from within. You are enough. You see, the world has always told her what she cannot do. That she is too soft, too emotional, too much, or not enough. But when she stops listening to the outside noise and starts listening to the silent roar of her spirit, something shifts, taking over as a power that does not roar, yet moves mountains. It does not wear armor, yet it shields one from every storm. This power is belief. Not belief handed over by others, not something inherited or taught, but belief that rises quietly from within. For a woman, the world has often tried to define her boundaries, confine her dreams, and measure her worth in terms of roles, appearances, or expectations. But belief, true belief, does not come from outside. It emerges when she stops measuring herself against the world's lens and starts seeing herself through her own. She begins to understand that she doesn't need to be chosen to be worthy. She doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Belief is not a shout. It is a steady pulse. It is what lets her take the first step, even when the path is invisible. It is what keeps her going when no one is clapping. It is what helps her rise, not once, but every time she falls. This belief is not naive. It does not ignore fear. It simply walks with it. It knows pain, but does not collapse under it. It has tasted failure, but refuses to be defined by it, she believes. And that belief becomes her compass. It tells her, you may not have it all figured out. You may not know how, but go. Begin. Move. And in that quiet inner knowing, she unlocks something no one else can give her. The permission to become. The world is loud. It speaks in commands, in expectations, in comparisons. It tells her who she should be, what she should do, how she should look, how she should live, how she should live. From the moment she opens her eyes, it begins. Layers of noise piling on, layer after layer, until she starts to forget the sound of her own voice. But somewhere beneath the noise, there is stillness. A quiet space untouched by judgment, beyond all roles and labels. It does not rush. It watches. And when she grows tired of the world's noise, when its words no longer fit her skin, she begins to turn inward. She listens. Not to what others say she is, but to what she has always known deep down, that she is more than the sum of her roles. More than the lines others have written for her. And in that listening, in that deep silence, she starts to remember. The noise may continue around her, criticism, doubt, distraction, but it no longer enters her, because she's found a place within herself that no noise can touch. No noise can touch. The voice that rises from that stillness is not demanding, yet it is firm. It says, you are not lost, you are never broken. You are only remembering who you are. And once she hears that voice, truly hears it, the world's shouting begins to fade. It may still be there, but it no longer leads. Because now she is led by something far deeper. The stillness that knows there comes a point when she grows weary of asking. Weary of waiting for someone else to say, yes, you may. She has spent too long bending, adapting, reshaping herself to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. Too long seeking approval that always slips just out of reach. One day, quietly, without ceremony, something inside her shifts. She stops. She no longer waits. She realizes no one is coming to grant her access to her own life. No one can truly give her the green light to be who she already is. And in that moment, the need for permission dissolves. She understands now that the power she kept looking for, in eyes and nods and applause, was never theirs to give. It was always hers to claim. The moment she stops asking, she begins becoming. She no longer walks the path drawn by others. She begins to carve her own, even if the first step is uncertain and the next few are rough, because freedom doesn't come with conditions. Worth isn't a reward, it's a birthright. And so she rises, not with rebellion, but with clarity. Not to prove anything to the world, but to finally meet herself, untamed, unshaped by anyone else's hands. She no longer seeks doors to be opened for her. She builds her own and walks through them without hesitation. She used to wait for someone to notice, for someone to say, oh, well done, or you're doing enough. She used to measure her worth by how many likes, how many nods, how many people stood up and clapped. But applause is fleeting. Praise comes and goes, like the wind, soft when you need it most, loud when it doesn't matter. She learned slowly that chasing it only left her empty. There came a time when she stopped looking outward and turned her gaze inward. In the quiet, she asked herself the only question that truly mattered. Am I true to who I am? And in answering that, she found something more lasting than praise. She found alignment. She discovered that her value doesn't rise and fall based on someone else's mood, or recognition, or approval. Her value is steady. Her path, unique. And the only person who needs to understand her journey is herself. So she began to act from a place of authenticity, not for validation, but for truth. She worked, created, loved, and lived, not to be seen, but because it felt real, because it mattered to her, to her. She no longer craved the stage or the spotlight. She didn't need to be clapped for to keep going. Her strength came from within, from the deep, unwavering knowing that she is enough, even when no one is watching. Especially, then done fear once sat beside her like an old friend. It spoke often in a familiar voice, telling her to wait, to shrink, to stay safe. Doubt would echo right after, asking if she was ready, if she was worthy, if she was capable. For a long time, she listened. She mistook their voices for wisdom, their caution for care. But they were only chains dressed in concern. Then belief came, quiet but steady. It didn't fight fear. It didn't silence doubt. It simply stood beside her, asking one simple thing. What if you tried anyway? She realized she didn't need fear to disappear in order to move. She didn't need doubt to vanish before she dared. She only needed to believe just a little more than she feared. So she took a step. The ground didn't fall away. The world didn't end. It shifted. Subtly, profoundly, because she shifted. With each step forward, fear still followed, but it no longer led. Doubt still whispered, but it no longer decided. Belief had taken root, and though it was quiet, it was unshakable. It didn't need to shout because it already knew. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to move with it. That belief wasn't about knowing the outcome. It was about trusting the process. And with every step, her fear faded, not because it disappeared, but because it was no longer in charge. She spent years chasing after the image of success, thinking it was something outside of her, something she had to catch, something she had to prove to the world. A goal, a destination, a dream that others would notice and praise. But no matter how hard she ran, the finish line always seemed to move just a little further away. One day she stopped, not because she was tired, but because she realized something profound. She had been running towards the wrong thing. She had been chasing success, but success was not a place to arrive at. It was a state of being, a choice to embody. She looked around and saw that everything she had ever needed was already within her. The power to create, to change, to evolve, it was all there. It wasn't about reaching some distant goal. It was about becoming the person who could rise to meet whatever came her way. She didn't need to chase success because she realized that she was success. She was the creator of her own path, not a follower of someone else's. She didn't have to wait for permission or for someone to hand her the title of a successful. The moment she stopped chasing it, she became it. Her life was no longer about running towards something. It became about growing into the woman she was always meant to be. She stopped waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel and became the light, shining with the brilliance of a woman who had finally understood that success is not a destination. It's a journey that begins the moment you decide to walk your own path. She had been told countless times that freedom was something you had to earn, something you had to fight for, something you could only attain once the world allowed it. It was a reward, a distant promise, something given to those who played by the rules, followed the right path, or endured the right struggles. For years, she waited for that freedom to be granted, thinking it was something outside of her, something to be given when the time was right. But as she grew, a quiet realization began to take root. Freedom was not a gift to be earned. It was a truth she was born with, a part of her that had always been there, buried under layers of expectations, fears, and doubts. It wasn't about waiting for permission. It was about remembering who she truly was. She began to understand that freedom is not a reward given by the world. It's the very essence of who we are. It is the power to choose, to act, to think independently, without needing someone else's approval or validation. Freedom is not an external force, but an internal revelation. When she started to let go of the belief that freedom was something to be granted, she found that it was already hers. It had always been there, waiting to be reclaimed. She didn't have to fight for it, because it was her birthright. It was not a distant goal, but the ground beneath her feet, the air she breathed, the space in which she could create and live as her true self. She stopped looking for the key to freedom outside of herself and began to unlock the door within. And as she did, she realized that freedom wasn't something she could lose because it had never been separate from her. It was her own truth, her own truth, her own essence, her own unshakable foundation. And once she remembered that, she began to live it fully. For so long, she had followed paths drawn by others, paths that were neatly laid out and promised to lead to success. These paths were well-trodden, widely accepted, and easy to follow, but they didn't belong to her. They didn't reflect who she was, what she wanted, or where she truly wanted to go. She had walked them because that was what was expected, because that was what others had done before her. But one day she stopped and asked herself, why? Why was she walking this path? Was it truly her choice, or was it a road carved by someone else's hands, someone else's dreams? And in that moment of questioning, she realized that she had been living someone else's life. She began to see that she didn't need to follow a pre-drawn path. She was the creator of her own. It didn't matter if it was unconventional or misunderstood. It didn't matter if it didn't look like everyone else's journey. What mattered was that it was hers. The road she walked now would be shaped by her, marked by her, and true to her heart. So she began to forge a new path, one that was messy, imperfect, and entirely hers. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always clear. There were moments of doubt and moments of struggle, but there was also a sense of freedom in knowing she wasn't bound by anyone else's idea of success. Each step forward was hers to claim. Oh, no longer did she look to others for direction. She trusted her instincts, her desires, her dreams. She understood that the most important journey was the one she carved out for herself. And with each decision, with each step, she built the life that had always been waiting for her, patiently, quietly, within her soul. She was no longer a traveler on someone else's road. Oh! She was the architect of her own path, and that path was one of endless possibility. She spent much of her life trying to meet the expectations of others, trying to fit into molds that weren't made for her. She thought that her worth was defined by how well she could please those around her, by how perfectly she could perform the roles assigned to her by society, family, or peers. She pushed herself to be what others wanted, thinking that if she could prove her value, if she could just meet these standards, then she would finally be enough. But one day she realized something that shifted everything. She wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. Her life wasn't about meeting someone else's idea of success. It was about discovering what was true for her, finding what brought her joy, fulfillment, and peace, and following that path, no matter how different or unconventional it seemed. She stopped measuring herself against the expectations of others. She stopped asking for permission to follow her heart, to pursue what mattered to her. She understood that her journey was hers to shape, and that it didn't require the approval of anyone else to be valid. In this realization, she found freedom. She stopped feeling like she needed to meet someone's checklist, to follow a prescribed path. Her worth was not determined by how much she could conform, but by how authentically she could live. The need to prove herself faded because she no longer had anything to prove, except to herself. She no longer defined herself by external success or the opinions of others. Her only measure of success was whether she was true to who she was, whether she was creating a life that felt aligned with her deepest values and desires. She lived, not to prove others wrong, but to prove herself right. To prove that she was worthy of the life she had always dreamed of, simply because she was willing to step into it with all of her heart. There is something powerful about belief. It isn't loud or dramatic, but it shifts the world around you in ways you can't always see. It's subtle in its quiet strength, and yet it carries a force that makes impossible things possible. When a woman believes, truly believes, it becomes more than just a thought. It becomes an energy that fuels her, pushing her forward, even when the world doubts her, even when the path is unclear, and even when fear tries to hold her back. She is unstoppable because belief is a fire that cannot be quenched. It burns not with reckless intensity, but with steady persistence. When you believe in something with every part of your being, when you align your thoughts, your actions, and your dreams with that belief, the obstacles that once seemed insurmountable begin to look different. They become challenges to be overcome, not walls to keep her confined. Belief turns doubt into determination, It turns uncertainty into courage. It transforms failure into a lesson and rejection into motivation. The more she believes, the less she needs external validation. She knows that success is not defined by the outcome, but by the commitment to the journey, the willingness to keep going no matter what. And the beauty of belief is that it doesn't need to be seen to be real. It doesn't need to be recognized by others to have value. It doesn't need approval to carry weight. Belief is personal, intimate, and profound. It is the quiet conversation she has with herself every time she stands back up after a fall, every time she faces another challenge, every time the world tells her she can't. This belief, however, isn't about blind faith. It's rooted in something deeper. It comes from the understanding that every step she takes is a step toward growth, toward something greater than herself. She may not have all the answers, but she knows that as long as she believes in herself, in her vision, in her purpose, she will continue to move, continue to evolve, continue to rise. She doesn't need anyone to tell her she's capable because she already knows. She doesn't wait for the perfect conditions to act because she understands that belief doesn't wait for the world to align. It creates its own momentum. She is not deterred by setbacks or failures because belief teaches her that there is no such thing as defeat. Only lessons to be learned, experiences to be gained, and wisdom to be collected. Belief is what turns the impossible into the inevitable. It's the quiet confidence that rises from deep within, the kind of confidence that is unshakable because it is not based on anything external. It's rooted in a trust in her own abilities, her own intuition, and her own strength. It doesn't matter if no one else believes in her. It only matters that she believes in herself. And when a woman believes, there's nothing that can stop her. She doesn't need external validation. She doesn't need the world to tell her she's worthy or capable. She doesn't need the spotlight to shine on her in order to move forward. She knows her worth, and because of that, she's unstoppable. Her belief becomes the force that carries her, the engine that drives her, and the reason she keeps going, even when the path is hard, even when the journey is long. This belief doesn't promise an easy road, but it promises that no matter how difficult it gets, she will always find a way to move forward. She becomes unstoppable because belief does not rest on immediate success or external recognition. It rests on the knowing that with belief, she can face anything, overcome anything, and ultimately, she will become the person she is meant to be. She is not waiting for permission to live her life. She believes, and because she believes, she does. And in doing, she becomes everything she ever dreamed of. And so, she rises. She rises, not because the world tells her to, but because she has always known she was meant to. Her belief is not a loud declaration, but a quiet certainty that carries her forward step by step toward the life she was destined to create. With each new challenge, with every moment of doubt, she remembers that her power lies within her belief, and it is this belief that makes her unstoppable. She doesn't need the world to approve her journey. She doesn't need external validation to know her worth. She simply knows that as long as she believes, she will continue to move, to evolve, and to achieve. Whoa. For the truth is, when she truly believes, nothing and no one can stand in her way. She believed, so she did. And in doing, she became everything she ever imagined and more. The world has yet to see all that she will accomplish, for her belief is the force that will shape it. And that force, unyielding and unstoppable, will never stop moving forward.